I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, published by Simon & Schuster Saga Press. And today we're going to be reviewing Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King. Now, as you know, I'm reviewing all the books that Stephen King wrote in publication order. We're to the Cycle of the Werewolf. Now, I've actually never read this before. I've read everything he's done, a lot of it multiple times, a lot of it 5 or 6 times. This is a book that I had never, ever read. I knew of its existence, but I just had kind of neglected to get it. It didn't look interesting to me. I thought for this review series, I would go ahead and buy a copy of the book and see what I was missing. Well, I wasn't missing much. I wasn't missing much, folks. I'm telling you, Cycle of the Werewolf. Let me go through the things that I think were disappointing, and which was pretty much all of it. You know, and I love Stephen King. I give all of Stephen King's books pretty glowing reviews. You know, I'm going to be reviewing all 80 of them, and I'm going to tell you like a good 76, 77 of them are going to be thumbs up for me. This one, not so much. Not so much. Cycle of the Werewolf. You know, it's only a short book. It's maybe 130 pages long. It's got some really great illustrations by Bernie Wrightson. Probably the best part of the book were the pictures. You know, let me tell you why I was disappointed in this book. And I think it's going to be a compliment overall to Stephen King why I was disappointed in this book. Because, you know, Salem's Lot was a great vampire story. It was 500 pages long. You got to know the characters. So when the horror started ramping up, you were just gripping your seat. This is a werewolf book. And it would seem only natural that Stephen King would go jump from vampires to werewolves. Had this been a 500-page novel like Salem's Lot, I would have loved it. I bet it would have been awesome. You know, but here we've got 127 some odd pages, and it really just seems like kind of an outline it reads like more of an outline for a better novel that could have been written. Like, this is Stephen King's outline for his epic werewolf novel that never got written. And that's why it's so disappointing to me. Because, you know, he sets up such an awesome premise with the book, with a werewolf that comes out every full moon and kills a different person. And, you know, in his normal books, you know, like every chapter a different person gets killed, but the chapters are only 2 or 3 pages each, so we don't really get to know the person who's getting killed. We don't give a crap if they get killed. And therein lies the problem. In Salem's Lot, we got to know the characters. In every Stephen King's book, we got to know the characters, you know, whether they're being chased by vampires or killer clowns. We got to know those characters. In the Cycle of the Werewolf, we don't get to know anybody before they're dead. And I think if this was actually made into a much larger novel, it would have been Stephen King's best. I think it would have been a favorite of most people. I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but it was made into a movie. This Cycle of the Werewolf was made into a movie a long time ago called Silver Bullet. I actually think Silver Bullet is an even better name than Cycle of the Werewolf. I think if Stephen King would have given us a 500-page epic horror novel called Silver Bullet, and it was about werewolves, it would have been awesome. It would have been a classic. Instead, we get this 127-page outline of what could have been. And that's why I am really disappointed in this novel. You know, because he sets it up with a new character getting killed by the werewolf every full moon. And if we would have just got to know those characters, it would have been so cool. I would have liked to have known, like, Stephen King does backstory so well on all the characters in all his novels, and he could have done it here. He really could have done it here. You know, this is the potential here is so huge that when the characters get killed off, I just quite frankly didn't care. It just, the story moved so fast. I wanted it to just slow down. I wanted to get to know the people. I wanted to get to know the werewolf. I wanted some werewolf lore. You know, I wanted God, I mean, even almost the werewolves in Twilight were better than this. I hate to say, at least we had something there to sink our teeth into. But the werewolf, just too small. Maybe had this not been an actual novel and had been in part of a short story collection, like Skeleton Crew or Night Shift. Maybe if it would just been a short story tossed into one of those short story collections, I'd be more forgiving. Because I'd be like, it's a short story about werewolves, whatever. But since it's an actual novel all of its own, I'm just so sorely, sorely disappointed. Not in Stephen King, just in the fact that I don't think he fleshed out the story enough. And you know what? Props to him for writing 90 books, 80 books that are just classics in and of themselves. And maybe there's just this one that I don't like. Whatever. I can't criticize him for that. I imagine he did what he wanted to with this, and I shouldn't tell him that he should have expanded on it. Hopefully, God, hopefully he will someday. Maybe like The Stand will, The Stand was a shorter novel. It was about 300,000 words, and he added another 150,000 words to it. Maybe he'll go back and do that with this sometime, because we do have great characters, the Drifter and Arnie and Stella and a bunch of others that get killed early on. I would have loved to have gotten to know them, but you don't because this book is so short. This is a passable book. Pass on this. I passed on it my whole Stephen King reading career up until this week, and I kind of wish I just kind of wished I had not picked it up because I was kind of jazzed to read it because I'd heard of it and I hadn't, ever picked it up, and I finally picked it up, and I was just kind of like, man, I wish I hadn't read this because it's seriously going to be the lowest ranked book on my Stephen King list when all is said and done after I've reviewed all 70, 80, or 90 of his books. So, that's it. That's all I've really got to say about this. I rate books 1 to 10, and as you know, I've ranked every Stephen King book pretty high. I give this a very woeful 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. It just wasn't for me. It could have been for me had it been 500 pages of epic Stephen King awesomeness. Instead, I felt like I was reading an outline for a Stephen King book. I end every single video I do by saying, every one of the books I write is dedicated to Stephen King, Motley Crue, and the Oakland Raiders, because those were the 3 most important things to me in my life as a kid, and so they get a shout out in every book that I write. So, 4 out of 10, Cycle of the Werewolf. Man, hard pass. You guys don't need to read this. Man, I would kind of avoid it if at all possible.